Jordan Larson's coming back to Nebraska. Jordy Ball might be coming back to Nebraska. If only Jordan Congdon had made that field goal in the 2006 Cotton Bowl, we'd all be good. Hello, everybody. This is the Pick Six Podcast. Tom Shatel and Sam, me. Just the two of us today, and this will be a lot of fun. We're going to talk about the column that went around the Big Ten on Sunday. Tom's column about scheduling, non-conference scheduling, the end of divisions, the large view, his conversations with Trev Alberts, really interesting stuff. And it made it across the Missouri River.
But that's not what anybody talked about.
That's right. They talked about one line, but it made it across the Missouri River. Let's be honest.
One word.
Well, that's true.
One word I've never used in my life.
Here we go. We'll talk about that. We're going to talk about the potential return of Jordy Ball to Nebraska. This is huge news. To be clear, the biggest story at the World-Herald on Monday was Jordy Ball. The biggest story in Lee Enterprises, I believe, was Jordy Ball. So this is not a small thing. This is one of the great athletes in collegiate sports. She's one of the top 5 athletes, I would say. And the chances of her potentially coming back to Nebraska are amazing. We may mention Jordan Larson returning to the Nebraska volleyball team here a little later. I'll say this. She's going to do a presser, like a Zoom cast tonight. Maybe we'll talk about this next week. Jordan's not going to be around until late September, maybe early October. A true celebrity and superstar. It'll be interesting to see how they use her. And then we'll talk a little baseball. Yeah. Nebraska baseball will change real fast.
Jordy Ball, Jordan Larson, Rob Childress.
That's right. It's it's like the mid 2000s again. We're going to start obviously with Husker football, and okay, so we had the schedules last week. You had takes. I kind of had a column a little bit later on. We'll get to the column in a minute that you wrote over the weekend that made such a splash all over the place, especially in Iowa. Okay, so back to the schedules, 2024, 2025. Right. I think you were happy with what you saw. I know I was happy with what I saw. UCLA and USC in the league, no more divisions, only Iowa as a protected rival. Right. You like that stuff?
I like it. I think it's, over 10 years, Nebraska's tried. Now, they haven't tried very hard. They haven't been very good. They have been awful. They've been awful at times. They have not won in that division. They won it once. By the way, Iowa's won it twice. Only just one more time than Nebraska. So, but I never felt like Nebraska. I felt like Nebraska. Maybe this is a bad take because I'm wrong on this, but I still feel like Nebraska is a little bit of an outsider in the Big Ten, and isn't that really
right? And
I think the way to do that is to just hang in there for a few decades. I'm not sure if the Penn Staters feel like they're part of it yet, but I think it just takes time, and you also have to win. But I just feel like a lot of these rivalries in the West were just kind of forced. Nebraska, this with Minnesota, and Wisconsin doesn't care about Nebraska, so they don't care if they play Nebraska. They got Minnesota and they got Iowa. Those are their two biggies. But in any case, I just feel like the Big Ten West was not holding Nebraska back, but it wasn't. It wasn't the problem, but it wasn't also the solution. I feel like Nebraska was never going to go anywhere trying to win that division, trying to be, to me, in college football, you're as good as you need to be. And for years, Nebraska needed to be as good as Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. It needed to be as good as Miami, Florida State, and Colorado for a while.
That was its peer group.
Yeah, and it just needed – those were the teams, and so now they needed to be as good as Iowa and Wisconsin. No slap against them, but they're not elite programs, and
they were not as good as those teams.
They failed miserably. But what I like about this is it was like a fresh start for Nebraska in this league, where in Nebraska there's like an old Big Ten and there's like a new Big Ten, and Nebraska was never going to be part of the old Big Ten, But now here comes USC and UCLA. Well, what are they going to think about all these trophy games and all this stuff? They're going to go, they're not going to be that impressed. They're going to be like, we're USC. We do our own thing. And there's more, the more they expand, the more they let teams in that have a different way of seeing the world. And I don't think they're done expanding. I think in the next decade, the Big Ten could get kind of weird. It's already kind of weird. So, in any case, I like the fact that Nebraska is able to play more teams, go up against the games like USC, UCLA, and so there's no way to say that without insulting people, but I just feel like, look, I use the word slumming, okay, and I don't know why I chose that word, but I did.
Well, I mean, why do you think? I mean, what did you?
What I'm saying is the Big Ten West was not a great place to be, and look, are we really that upset about this? Are people really going crazy over that? Because haven't we written and said it a million times? The Big Ten West it's not good. It's downright mediocre.
Right.
Haven't we written and said a million times? Well, Nebraska's been a big disappointment. They've been awful. They've underachieved. They haven't been good. They haven't lived up to their end of the bargain. There's a quote in that very same column from Trev Alberts saying that very same thing.
Right.
And I wrote in my takes last week the very same thing. So what I wrote was not new. It shouldn't be a big deal. It should be same old, same old. It was one line in a column that was about something else. And it was just sort of to reinforce the fact that I think Nebraska will be better over here than over here. And so they were slumming. But guess what? Everybody in that division has been slumming. Aren't they all? Slumming is, well, I'm better than where I'm at. I shouldn't be here. Shouldn't everybody in that division aspire to be better than the Big Ten West? Shouldn't they all aspire to be better than that? Yeah, they should. Do they? No, not all of them do. That's why I applaud Wisconsin. Wisconsin has done very well in the Big Ten West. They've owned it in some regards. And Wisconsin this past year said, what we're doing isn't good enough anymore. We're going to kind of blow this thing up a little bit. We had a chance to hire the native son, the favorite son, and continue the Barry Alvarez way, the Wisconsin, everything that they built. And I'm sure it's still going to be there, but they're going to take a different approach, a much different approach. It's a bit of a gamble, but they did it because what we're doing isn't going to be good enough, and I applaud that. And to me, the Big Ten West has not had nearly enough of that. What you've had is Iowa, and God love them, they love who they are, that they know who they are, and that's who they want to be, but they keep doing the same old deal. I mean, Brian Ferentz. I mean, it's like, okay, here's what we're going to do. Well, I think sometimes when you're around programs like that have that identity, but Nebraska's wired differently. They always have been. That's what I love about Nebraska football. As bad as they've been, as disappointing as it's been, as lost as they've been, they still want to be great. They still want to be elite. They still are wired that way, and they always will be. And so I believe that having an open schedule where they play everybody will serve them better.
Why do you think that the response, most of the negative response on Twitter came from media and fans in Iowa?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't go on Twitter very often. I've tried to just cut it out altogether because Twitter's not reality. I think I got zero emails, Sam. Zero. If I've touched the button, it's I get the emails, and I get them from Iowa. I get them from Husker fans. And I got zero. So I don't know what happened there. I do think that there's Iowans especially they're sensitive to this. Here comes the new guy. The new guy doesn't respect anybody. The new guy thinks he's better than everybody else. And in reality, the new guy is worse. He can't do anything right. But the new guy doesn't realize this and still thinks he's better than everybody else. Now, again, pay attention. We've all written this a million times. Right. Nebraska has been disappointing, and it's how many coaches have they had to fire before we keep writing it. So I don't know why they reacted that way. It's still a hot button. It shouldn't be. It's just, but yeah, I don't know. But I think there's still some of that the feeling. But everybody over in Nebraska said, "Hey, it's not good. We get it." And so I don't know.
I would, for a couple things, I think Iowa-Nebraska is a real rivalry. Whether it would have been when Nebraska joined the Big Ten, I don't know. But where it has gotten to since Sean Eichhorst said what he said after he fired Bo Pelini it's a little surprising. But I firmly believe that Iowa cares very much about Nebraska. I think Iowa's fans and maybe some of its media take pleasure in Nebraska's struggles, which is okay. You know? And I think as a result of everything that's happened over the last however many years, there could be now a resulting feeling on Nebraska's side too of that. And so I know that like Nebraska beating Iowa last November, right before they hired Matt Rule, gave a lot of Nebraska fans incredible pleasure. Like not in the we're great and we're awesome, but in just a real deep sort of almost depraved satisfaction for this is a horrible team, but we won this game.
Yeah. I mean, and Nebraska's for years were taught by Tom Osborne we don't have a rival. Oklahoma's our rival. We don't acknowledge anybody else, and so that used to drive Colorado crazy. Mm-hmm. When in fact, Nebraskans would always, whenever Colorado won, they would always root against Colorado. Yeah. I mean, I know people who used to root against Texas. We're happy they lost last night.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't acknowledge. Oh, we don't. But they pay attention. I know they pay attention to Iowa. So, it's a rivalry of you don't have to be different to be rivals. You can be the same and be fierce rivals, and that's. I honestly think Nebraskans and Iowans are a lot alike.
I agree.
In many ways, they're the same kind of people, but they look at football differently, and both with a tremendous pride with their team and their program and their coach. But that's why I liked the fact that it was the rivalry. I think you should have one. And I never thought Minnesota and Nebraska would develop. Again, Minnesota's got Iowa. They've got Wisconsin. They don't need Nebraska. Wisconsin just doesn't care about Nebraska. They just, you notice nobody from Wisconsin really got into it. So, in any case.
I feel like Iowa in some ways is never going to be the best football program in the Big Ten. But they do have some really good athletic programs, obviously wrestling, the women's basketball team with Caitlin Clark. That's very cool. But Iowa feels like the gatekeeper of the Big Ten on some level. Like that they're sort of the protector of the old Big Ten. Even prior to Penn State, the old Big Ten has of Ohio State and Michigan have always been kind of their own little thing, right. And they're elitists and they're all these things. They're in the Big Ten, but at the end of the day, Ohio State and Michigan are superpowers, and then there's the rest of the old Big Ten, and then there's this, then there's Penn State, then there's Nebraska, Maryland, and Rutgers, and now there's USC and UCLA, and the defender of the old Big Ten, that gatekeeper that has all of the historical knowledge, is Iowa, and it just feels like sometimes you're going to have to earn your way with that fan base, like they're still talking about 1985 and Chuck Long or 1990 whatever, and Matt Rogers or, all those things. Like, they have a long memory, too, and their memory is they don't really care for Nebraska and never have.
Well, because I think Nebraska was in their world. I mean, again, I wasn't here in the 80s. I don't remember any of that.
They're both good programs in the 80s.
They're just, absolutely. Look,
then in the 90s, Nebraska went one way, and Iowa went the other way.
Yeah. Both had legendary coaches. Look, I think that I can't remember what you're talking about. I was focused on something else.
Well, for example, our view, and this, Lee B's not sitting here, but I always have him a little bit in the back of my mind when I think about the Big Ten.
Oh, okay.
His view of Iowa and Kirk Ferentz and Iowa's view of Kirk Ferentz is way different. Like, if you were to, a bunch of Iowa media guys, some who are retired, some who aren't, their view of Kirk Ferentz is like, this guy's pretty great. Like, yeah, he may not have won X, Y, and Z, but he doesn't get the credit he's due. He's sort of the old man of the sport.
I agree.
His view, and this is somewhat mine too, but not quite. Like, I think he's a hell of a coach. But, I mean, you could count on one hand how many big games they've ever won. They beat Georgia Tech, a triple option team in the Orange Bowl. They beat Ohio State in 2017. That was a hell of a win. I think they beat Michigan one year. But, they got housed in the Rose Bowl, the one Rose Bowl they showed up in with Ferentz. And they don't tend to win really big games. They've always just been, hey, we're going to win our 7, we're going to win our 8, we're going to be happy with that. And, where's your 7 wins? Like that kind of thing. And so I've always viewed Iowa that way. I think Iowa views him as like, well, this thing was in the crapper when he got here, and he saved it.
But there's a lot of Iowa fans that I know who aren't on the Kirk wagon as much. They certainly respect him. They recognize what he's done, but they want him to change. They want him to evolve, and
he's going to have to in the new Big Ten.
Well,
because you don't have a division to win anymore. You can't. His way is going to finish 5th or 6th in the Big Ten every year.
That's what I really think. The people that are going to hold on to the old Big Ten are going to go through a transition process where it's going to be weird, and I don't know if it'll be hard for them or not. But the Big Ten West sort of held on to the old Big Ten way in a lot of ways. The rivalry games meant as much. You were trying to beat all these neighbors, all these old school Big Ten teams to get that shot at the championship. Right. Now those games are just going to be, a lot of those rivalry games are just going to be for that the trophy, and the axe, the pig, the bucket. It's just going to be, and what will that mean in the overall picture when you've got Ohio State, Michigan, and you've got people trying to get into the playoff, and the Rose Bowl is no longer the end game. It's going to be weird for some people, but those generations we're all aging out, and if they get into like Notre Dame or Florida State or Miami, I mean, what's that going to be like? So,
I know. It's hard to say, isn't it?
And in college football, there doesn't become these old conference identities, which I love, because the conferences were your neighborhood, your neighbors, where you lived. The SEC was Southern football. Pac-12 was West Coast dudes.
Quarterbacks.
Yeah. Southwest was, biscuits and gravy and wishbones and old Texas football. Big 8 was, the dirt kicking plains.
Combination of the Big Ten and the South.
Yeah. So the Big Ten had its great identity, and that's going to go away. But we still get these are going to be conglomerates now. Basically, if we get too big, they're just going to be collections of teams, places where people hang out,
right,
to go to the playoff,
right,
and they're not the conference won't mean anything. It's just this is where we This is where we collect our money and we try to go to the playoff.
Yeah.
And winning those conferences won't mean a thing unless it's home field for the playoff. So that's where we're headed. I predict one day I may not be here. It'll all blow up, and I think we'll all go back to the smaller deals. And I think maybe the networks will. Maybe they'll pay everybody equally. Maybe it'll be like the NFL, and we go back to the smaller conferences. But I don't know, Sam. It's but right now we're in the
got a
middle
lot of
this.
noise. That was an interesting column. I'll just leave it at that. It was
Just
good.
because of one word, and really something that has been written many times.
Sure.
And in fact, had been written like 2 or 3 days before, and hadn't gotten any attention. So
I think it's more. Yes, it was the one word, but I also think that like one media person was like, well, if Wisconsin said they were slumming in the Big Ten West, it would make sense because they dominate the Big Ten West, which is true. And I understand what that point is, but I think it's not so. What you're not really talking even right about results.
No.
You're talking about Nebraska's football's idea of itself and aspirational. Like you're talking about what it means to compete at the college football's highest level.
Yes.
And so long as you're in the Big Ten West and you're in this little package,
Right.
that's not going to happen. And that is a valid argument. In the history of the Big Ten West from 2014 until through this year, there's really been two teams, 2015 Iowa and 2017 Wisconsin, that were like that were even pot caliber of going to the playoff, and both of them went to the Big Ten title game and they lost. Now those are fine teams. But the reality is there was only two of them. Well, and they the big game that they needed to win to make it to the playoff, they didn't win. So, that's something that people have to work through.
What I wrote is a representative, I believe, of Nebraska and their attitude toward college football, their approach. It's different. That's who you brought into the Big Ten. Okay, we saw this during COVID. Nebraska's not just going to fall in line. Nebraska's going to do what Nebraska wants to do.
Right.
It doesn't matter if they're losing every game. They're so wired, and people think they're stuck in the past. No, Nebraska's trying to get to the next deal. They're looking at the future. I'd argue some of the Big Ten schools are kind of stuck in the past of who they are, of who this is who we have to be.
I think you're right. I think this changes that. Wisconsin. Now I don't know if Wisconsin's change is going to work, but they are. That's right.
And so
they could have rolled into this with Paul Chris, and they would have went 8-4 or 9-3 in the regular season, and everybody would have looked around and said, "We get to do jump around 7 times a year. We get to win some games at home. We get to have 90% of the stadium sold out and eat some brats." And for whatever reason, the athletic director up there was like, "No, I don't want to do that."
Right.
Now it's gutsy. I don't know if it's going to work. It's kind of what Steve Peterson did, and that was a risk.
A little
bit,
work. But I think they hired a coach, though.
Yeah, they hired a much more qualified coach.
Who's not an NFL guy.
Right.
Right. They at least have that going for them. They'll still play defense. They'll still should be physical. But when you run an offense like that, you can't. You're not physical all the time when you practice.
Right.
And so Nebraska's that's what happened to Nebraska. So, I really think it's the Big Ten is when they changed the identity, they wanted them to be national. You bring in other attitudes in. They see the world differently, and so that's what I meant. Right. And I think I appreciate you saying that because I haven't been able to really put that into words. Maybe I should have put it into words better.
No, but you've been around the sport a long time, and my point is that what you're meaning is this is a great sport, and the Big Ten West. And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I think the Big Ten West is great, and I've enjoyed covering it. But simultaneously, what you always knew is that that division was not going to produce. When Michigan came to town, it was a different feeling than when Wisconsin did. It just
absolutely.
was.
And
It's like the show came to town when Michigan comes to town.
Right. Well, the SEC is wired like Nebraska.
Right.
Like if you're Ole Miss or whoever, you're trying to go to the playoff.
Same reason Oklahoma and Texas are leaving a league that they dominated.
Yeah.
Oklahoma left a league that it dominated.
Yeah.
To go to a league it will not dominate because of these same reasons.
Yeah. And so Nebraska is, they want, they're wired more like an SEC team.
They are.
But I think USC, UCLA, USC definitely. But if you bring in any other powers, they're going to be like that too.
I think USC is. I don't think UCLA.
But I wish the Big Ten West schools were wired that way too.
Yeah, they're not.
They're not.
Well, it's possible that PJ Fleck is personally wired that way, but I think he also has embraced a playing style that wins the games among his peers. And the reality is, the way that Minnesota plays, the way PJ Fleck plays, has a ceiling. And the ceiling is you're going to lose games against more talented teams that can score because you can't play keep away.
That's to me an issue of the Big Ten West. In a lot of ways, you have to play a style that wins the division. The goal is to win the division, and that in itself is a problem because you're not necessarily being your best. You're being what you have to be to win the division. When you get out of the division, oops. So
it's a very to take it into soccer. It's a very conservative style of soccer, where once you get a goal, you pull everybody back and you try like hell not to score again, but to try to prevent the other team from scoring.
Right.
And in the Big Ten, with the exception of maybe Purdue, which was kind of wide open, a lot of the teams were just like, look, we're going to sit on the ball and we're going to try to win 9-6, and we don't care, and that's how we're going to play. And Illinois almost beat Michigan doing that last year. The style can be effective.
I also think mentally it wears on you. We saw this in the Big 12 with the South and the North. Well, the North sucks. They're not any good.
Right.
But actually, they were good.
They were pretty good there for a couple of years. Yeah.
K-State, Colorado, and Missouri for a while were as good as anybody.
07 was special.
I mean, so in KU, that one, yeah. So, but you start hearing, like Big Ten West, well, you suck. You're never going to beat the East. Forget about it. It's a long shot. You start to believe it. Mm-hmm. And it impacts recruiting, impacts fans, everything. That's why we're all slumming. Anybody in the Big Ten West is slumming because you all deserve better. And look at Big Ten basketball. No divisions. Everybody's trying to make the tournament.
They're trying.
Everybody's trying to get to the Final Four. They really are.
They need to get better in basketball, but you're right.
But
you're
saying the
you're
attitude is
yes.
You're not stuck in trying to win a division.
Right.
It's wide open. Everybody's trying to win the league and try to go to the tournament.
I think in the women's side, they've perfected that. Yeah, it's interesting. In 07, if they had a 4-team playoff, I don't know how you couldn't have argued that the 4 teams in 2007 should have been LSU, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Kansas.
Right.
Wouldn't that have been cool? I wish we had. As it turned out, none of the 3 Big 12 teams played in the national title game. Ohio State did. And Ohio State wasn't even that good.
Well, Missouri got screwed out of going to the Orange Bowl, but some of us.
But if you do the playoff again, I think Missouri, Kansas, and Oklahoma would all be in the playoff, and they'd be with LSU, and OU would be the 2, and they'd be playing KU again or something like that. Anyway, let's move on to more stuff. That was a good conversation about scheduling. The biggest news in the state, honestly, is Jordy Ball. Now, she left Oklahoma, the rare elite athlete to leave a school after winning 2 national championships. She put a note out on Twitter Monday. She has not announced that she's going to Nebraska, but she said she's going to return home to a state where athletes are overlooked. Now, in theory, she could go to Creighton. I don't think that's going to happen. She could go to UNO. I don't think that's going to happen. I think she's going to go to Nebraska. Her boyfriend pitches at Nebraska. She had been committed to Nebraska prior to decommitting because Rhonda Revelle was put under investigation. If Jordy Ball goes to Nebraska, how significant of development is that? Not just for that team, but for the whole athletic department.
I don't know, and I'll say this because I think it'll be huge. But I love watching softball. But I don't understand the impact of it. I haven't. I just don't know. I think I will say this: the greatest volleyball players at Nebraska that they've ever had have been statewide celebrities, have been people that do change. They get people's attention.
Yes.
That they change how the high schools operate. They change how the girls growing up sport they want to play.
Mm-hmm.
I think softball's pretty good in Omaha. Pretty good. I think it's I don't know. I won't compare it to any of the states.
Yeah.
I think it's already. But obviously, if she's going to come in and try to change the state, well, she has to go to Nebraska to do that. So no offense to Creighton, but I mean the Creighton softball facility, I cannot see her doing that. So
No, I think she's
I think it's going to Nebraska. So,
she hadn't announced it yet. So,
but in any case,
Yeah.
I think it's big. I don't know how big. I don't know enough. I don't follow softball enough, but I know that when I watch the softball World Series, which I do, and I see her, I was going, "Yeah, that girl's from Nebraska." Oh yeah, she ought to be here. It's like, but I know how big it is. It's getting bigger all the time. ESPN has really embraced it. I think games will be packed next year. I think wherever they go, it'll be, we'll certainly have to get on board, and we'll want to follow that sport a lot more. I will. I'll have to show up and do all that stuff, and it'll be great.
Maybe you'll try to hit one of her fastballs the way Peaches.
I learned my lesson a long time ago. That those things are, close your eyes and swing.
It's unbelievably hard.
But I love this. This is a great story, especially because of the family. She comes back because of the way she was raised. She wants to give back. That is so Nebraska. That's so Omaha. I know tons of families that are involved in the select sports, the club stuff, and their travel, and they do all this and invest time. But that's kind of that's a really a Nebraska thing. Yeah, people. That's how families bond sometimes. They go to those games together. They travel in cars and families and vans and hotels on the road. And so I thought she was really raised right, and like a lot of kids in this area. And so I'm excited. But what a perspective at that age. What a maturity. I mean, obviously she's a world-class athlete and maybe the top players in the country in her sport.
She's the best player.
And best player, okay. And she certainly understands that, but she wants to use that to come back and help, come back and grow and be part of family. And, not worried about money or cashing in or this or that.
Well,
it's, you know what I mean? It's
she'll make some money.
Right, but I'm just saying she's got a couple of here's my time to come back and make an impact. And how many kids do that? How many kids are aware of that kind of thing? So I really I just applaud the whole thing, and I think because of that, again, I've never met her, never talked to her, but she has that kind of mentality. I think she's going to resonate with a lot of people in Nebraska. Of course, Nebraskans love a Nebraska hero, comes back to play for the Huskers and so on. So I think she'll be embraced, and it's just great stuff. Things are shaping up down there a little bit.
I think it'll have a cascading effect if she goes back there. A couple things about just what I know, and I've never talked to her either, but I follow what she's done at Oklahoma pretty closely. First, I think you're getting if Nebraska gets her, you're getting an athlete who becomes almost immediately the most prominent vocal voice within the department. If there's one thing that I think Nebraska's been missing, both on the men's and women's side, in many cases, is just those kinds of transformative athletes. You're Caitlin Clark, if you will. Now Caitlin plays in a higher profile sport,
right?
But I think Caitlin and Jordy are similar in the sense that Caitlin won't do any interview. She's a vocal leader in the athletic department. She does a lot of things for Iowa that I think has helped the visibility of that athletic department, irrespective of the team.
Right.
I think Ball, in some ways, can be that person too. I think she can be the kind of person who raises the overall competence level of a number of sports on campus. And like for example, if you wanted to pitch to a basketball player in this state, hey, here's why you stay back. Here's why you stay here instead of going somewhere else. Why don't you talk to this person who's been somewhere and won national championships and voluntarily came back to this place? And why don't we just let Jordy talk about why she wanted to do that?
Yeah.
Man, that's not probably going to work with a guy. Maybe it will, but that's going to be powerful for athletes in this state to hear that, and it may be very effective with a football player or a men's boys basketball player. You never know, but that's somebody that you can use. I think that her visibility will raise the overall competence level of the athletic department. And to be honest with you, I think it's good that it's not in volleyball.
Well,
and nothing wrong with volleyball. I think they do a great job. They're certainly the queens of Nebraska's athletic department. But I think it helps to have great athletes in sports other than that sport. Because I think they get used to it, and then I think they don't always realize sometimes the prominence they have on the stage. So I think there's that, and then I think there's, of course, the impact of the team is, first of all, they become an immediate College World Series contender because that's how pitching is. And if she goes there, I think other players will follow because they're going to want to play with her.
That's what I was going to say. Her impact on the program, she's got 2 years, but a lot can happen in 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
And she can. I don't understand. I don't know what their scholarship situation is or the transfer situation. Probably aren't a lot of players who want to leave right now, but they're
they don't.
But they would be able to attract some people, and I agree. And it's right at the perfect time because softball's on fire. People love watching that, and ESPN shows more and more of it.
Oh, the sport's terrific.
It's great, and so yeah,
it's fat. The sport is fast. There's genuine emotion. Like if you compare, and baseball's getting there, but if you compare the emotion and the fire in the Women's College World Series to the Men's College World Series, there's really no comparison.
Yeah.
One feels like it's life or death every pitch, and you cover the College World Series for some time now. I think 30 years, 31 years.
I lost track.
You know that first night there's some electricity, maybe the second day.
Yeah.
By about Monday of the following week, even the crowd is like, well, I guess here we go. You're just ready for the thing to be.
Yeah, it's usually Tuesday.
But women's college softball is not like that.
I know.
It's wild.
I agree.
From the beginning to the end, there's emotion and fire and all these other things, and so you're right. The sport's completely.
I think we're going to have a sold out softball season next year, and I don't know if they can put any more seats around that park, but it's going to be sold out.
Put one in Haymarket,
and
bring in an artificial.
Yeah,
fence.
I don't know. Yeah, but her impact will be fun to watch, and so and then. Also Jordan Larson coming back. I mean, it's kind of a fun deal right now.
So Larson's going to be an assistant coach for Nebraska. Based on what I'm reading from the press release, she is not going to fully engage in that process until she returns from overseas. So they can add a third assistant coach as of July 1st.
Right.
And I don't know. I guess. Now, to be clear, Nebraska could have done a lot of different things. I mean, everybody on the planet wants to coach here, but they picked Jordan, and I guess Jordan probably picked them. I'm sure there's a lot of things that Jordan could have done. She obviously was going to be a coach at the University of Texas until that fell apart. So the U.S. is currently competing in the Volleyball Nations League, which Larson is on the 30-player roster and is available for selection. She plans to play with the national team in qualifiers for the 2024 Olympics. From September 16th through the 24th in Poland before joining the Huskers for the rest of the 2023 season. Now, maybe she'll be there in August. I don't know. But it sounds like to me she's going to show up right around the time they start Big Ten play. And then she plans on going to the Olympics next summer.
Well, will she be here for the volleyball day?
I don't know. It's hard to say.
Maybe she'll walk through the tunnel.
Yeah, she probably will. I'm guessing she could get back for that, but I think she.
I would think somebody of her caliber and obviously a Nebraska girl would want to be at that if she any way she can, because that's a thing everybody wants to see.
So basically, she was the MVP of the Tokyo Olympics.
Yeah.
So she was, in other words, she's the best volleyball player in the world. And
she's been called the best volleyball player of all time.
I don't know how that all works.
I don't either, but I just remember at
I don't know.
the last Olympics, people who know volleyball were saying that. So.
I think that sounds fine to me. I'll let the expert, but she's certainly the best volleyball player in the world at the time.
Yeah, they're going to do a statue at some point, right? Or have they already done that?
Trev turned that down. They
he
said
did?
No statue.
Well,
I think is what they say.
Well, we need to get it back.
Well, I think they're trying to slow down the statue train. Anyway, so it's going to be an interesting addition. Certainly, my understanding of her is that she's a good coach, a really good communicator. I mean, she's a celebrity. I mean, she is a superstar on the world stage, who kind of like a great actor, a great actress. And I'm not saying she's an actress, but I'm saying that it's like you would bring Cate Blanchett into your actor's room, or your acting class. So I think she'll have a benefit to the program.
And if she's going to get into coaching, then she needs to be here.
Yeah.
Not Texas, not wherever. Right. But so it all makes sense.
It does. I think sometimes when you're that good and you're that international athlete, I wonder if it's always easy to transition back to the coaching world. Yeah. Maybe it used to be easier than it is now. We'll have to see how it unfolds. I'll be really curious to see. She has a Zoom call tonight, and that'll be intriguing. She's a great communicator and a true superstar wherever she goes. So it'll be really interesting to see how that coaching tenure sort of unfolds. Nebraska volleyball is really special. They've got incredible talent on this team. I watched some of the stream matches from Brazil. Now, they were playing some teams that were way overmatched, but they have some real talent. This is a more talented team than they've had. I'm just saying this. This team is more talented than they've had. I'm just saying that.
Well,
they are.
All I know is I felt like the last year especially, the team just kind of wore down. It was injured. I felt like they just kind of ran out of gas at the end. And Wisconsin, very, very good, obviously. National champs a couple years ago. And but Nebraska's good. And guess what? Wisconsin will still be good. And the Big Ten's getting better. So
right. I think Nebraska has the best coach in the sport. And I think what he was able to do over the last 3 to 4 years, and he may not agree with me, and he knows better than I do. My sense of where Nebraska volleyball has been in the last 3 to 4 years is he's a hell of a coach, and he and his coaches have devised a system, and they've got Lexi Rodriguez, who's a specific kind of elite. Right. They've found a way to make it almost impossible for teams to score. So he is he's a great defensive coordinator.
Well, he was. That's how he started San Diego high school football.
He really has figured out a way to make it very hard for teams to score on Nebraska, and so they're winning some matches on the wins of his coaching talent. But this group, when you just watch Harper Murray come off the floor, or you watch that setter Bergen Riley, this group looks like they have the talent. And I think Nicklin Hames would even freely say this. She would say, I'm not the greatest setter of all time. And the fact that I kept having to be forced into being that role instead of a defensive specialist was an indicator that we didn't quite have all the pieces. And I think she was a great defensive player, but they tried to replace her at setter, and Kennedy Ward wasn't ready. And so Nicklin had to go back in and do it. But I feel like they've now finally got the pieces where they've got elite talent. And if they have the talent, I think they do, and they still have the head coach that they have, it's hard for me to not see that they're the best team in the country.
Well, I mean, we will see.
At least by the end.
But at least I think the defensive angle or approach was spot on because volleyball has gotten so much better. More teams are playing at a high level, but more teams are playing offense. Offenses are a lot better. There's more skill on the corners, and so yeah, defense. Well, that's something
really
that's something not everybody does. So
right. He said on a radio show last year, and it was a throwaway line almost. It was on Sports Nightly. And he might have been talking to his daughter. I think he was, and she asked him a question about something, and he said, how do you do this, this, and this? And his answer, and it was like 8 seconds long. He's just like, well, you signed with Jordan Larson. You signed Michaela Fecke. And what he was saying in that moment, he wasn't dissing really his talent, but he kind of was. He was kind of saying, we need to have Jordan Larson or Michaela Fecke on our team. And I think with Harper Murray, they got it. And I don't think you always know when you recruit the number one recruit in the country, but I think they got it.
Sounds like Barry Switzer.
Yeah.
Well, what do you need? I need Billy Sims. I need Jamel Holloway. I need Tony Casillas. That's how you win. I mean, so
that's right. And I think they've got their players.
Yeah.
I think Harper Murray is that player for them.
Yeah.
And she isn't the only one. I think I think Becca Alec is going to be there too, and they got a defensive specialist and Lainey Chaboy, I think is how you say it, that is a unique athlete. I don't know that she's as good or as smart as Lexi Rodriguez, but she can get almost anywhere on the floor, all those things. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Jordan Larson. Okay, last thing, baseball. Nebraska baseball fires Jeff Christie, hires Rob Childress, hires another coach from Wichita State.
Well, I wasn't sure if this would happen or not.
Did you know something was coming?
No.
You kind of mentioned it.
No, I just said if the most qualified guy is in the program, he should be doing that job, and so not just sitting back doing, the transfer portal or the personnel or the putting the team together. I mean, just before Rob Childress, when they were with Van Horn, it was like Clint Eastwood coming out to the mound. Mm-hmm. He walked out there. He was a badass. And you're going, okay, this is like walking out in the middle of, the street. He's going to fight somebody. When he went to the mound, that pitcher was shaking.
Yeah.
What's he going to say? What's he going to do? And they have not had that as much. A couple years ago, they had really good attitude, but they've lost some of that. I really think that Will Bolt had to do it his way. He comes in here. Okay, I've got Jeff Christie. He was a former catcher. I've got confidence in him. He's my guy. We're gonna try. We're gonna do this stuff. But a lot of it comes down to the pitching coach is only as good as the pitchers. Right? It's like any other sport. You're only as good as your players. And I really think Rob Childress is going to help recruit. He's going to get better pitchers in there, but he's also going to, he's going to be tough on them, and that's good. But I don't necessarily fault Will Bolt for doing it. I think as a young coach, you go through a learning process, you try things. If they don't work, if you stay with them, then it's your fault. But if you make changes, the hard decisions, I'm sure it was very, very hard. I told Jeff Christie that he was gone. But that's what a head coach has to do. So we're seeing Will Bolt mature into the head coaching job. And look, Rob Childress with one of his mentors, and it's hard to be your mentor's boss. It's hard to tell, your boss, what to do, and it's even harder because they can overshadow you.
Right.
Some people will say, "Well, why isn't he the head coach? Why don't they make Childress the head coach?" Well, that's what you might hear. They don't start winning. So, in a way, it's a natural move, but it's also a little gutsy. But it shows Will Bolt's maturity as a head coach. Very secure in himself, a lot of confidence, and I don't think Childress would do it if he thought it would harm Will. I think he loves Nebraska. I think it was a natural move. Will it turn everything around? I don't know. But it'll make it better. What they were doing was not good enough. No. So they needed to make some moves. Sirianni from Wichita State. Wichita State's baseball has not been what it was, but he's a guy that knows this as part of the country, and I think he also knows hitting. So Will Bolt knows hitting. So I think it's all good so far. I mean, I think it was the right thing to do. I'm sure it was very hard.
NCAA regional or bust next year?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what, part of my interview with Trev, I asked him about baseball, and he stood behind Will Bolt's moves, and we talk a lot. And, I had tried to ask him about Fred Hoiberg as next year NCAA or bust for Fred, and he wouldn't go there.
Did he get his money back?
We're not gonna talk about that kind of stuff. And so, obviously, we all want to go to a tournament. We all want to do this. So, I don't know if it's NCAA or bust. I think we
for Hoiberg?
No, for Nebraska baseball.
I think for Hoiberg it is not.
I think absolutely.
You think so? You think they go to the NIT? He's gone. I do not.
I think I don't know. I don't know what Trev thinks about basketball. Again, we don't have a track record of that at UNO. I really think how you play matters, and the way they're playing now is certainly fits into the identity Trev wants. At some point, you got to do something. So yeah, I think NIT, but then NCAA the next year. I mean, NIT gets them one more year.
Sure.
Yeah. At some point, it's time to do this. So, no tournament. I wouldn't be surprised if it happened next year. But if NIT and he comes back, fine. But then it has to happen the next year.
Sure.
And then you don't have Tom Monaga, and you better get some. I feel like they're going year to year right now.
Right.
The roster. So at some point in the next 2 years, there has to be an NCAA tournament. So.
I think people are getting impatient, and they should.
Well,
know, when they went on the late run last year, that was a lot of fun, and it was like people finally felt like this is what we thought we were getting when we hired the guy, and then they go to the Big Ten tournament, and they play like crap for 30 minutes, and then they had come back late.
I know they had COVID, but it doesn't take 4 or 5 years to go to the tournament. It doesn't.
No.
If you have the right guy in there, the right plan, and you gotta get lucky with some players, but with the transfer portal, it doesn't take 4 or 5 years. So I wouldn't be surprised either way next year.
All right, that is our Pick Six podcast for the week. I don't know if we'll be back next week or not. For Tom, I'm Sam, and that is our chat for this week.